something just happened recently, and that got me all excited as we finished reading through the Gospel of Luke. And I was just thinking today about the impact of this latest reading of the Gospel of Luke, and these things that stood out to me, these things that have just been going through my mind, and I just wanted to share a little bit of my excitement, my joy at the experience with the viewers here, and hopefully get some of you to give me some feedback. We can have a conversation about the Gospels. I'm always excited to have a conversation about the Gospels. So I want to talk mainly about the last few chapters of Luke, because that's what's most fresh in my mind. This isn't really a planned class or anything, just some thoughts that have been on my mind I wanted to get across. The last few chapters of Luke, and there's some really important elements to them that make Luke stand out, that make it such an important version of those events, the last days of Jesus' time on earth. And I want to highlight two of those stories here. The first one being the lead up to Jesus' arrest, the whole thing with Jesus being numbered among the transgressors, the way that he is crucified as a transgressor alongside two criminals, because the Gospel of Luke shares with us the longest version of that story. It starts back in chapter 22, where during the Last Supper with his disciples, Jesus has this instruction about their need to get swords, and he says it's because this thing must be fulfilled in me that he was numbered with the transgressors. It's kind of this ominous remark that he makes, referring to this need for him to be numbered with the transgressors. Then we see that go on into the Garden of Gethsemane, where one of Jesus' disciples uses one of those swords to attack the high priest's servant and cut off his ear. And Jesus then tells him, okay, that's enough, put away your sword. And then Jesus heals the man, which is uniquely told in the Gospel of Luke. So already we have elements of the story being told in Luke that we don't find out about in the other Gospels. Like I always say, you gotta read all four Gospels, read them all the way through to get the full story. And that's such an important part of the story to me, the way Jesus heals that man. Someone in front of him there has been hurt, has been injured, and Jesus makes it right, even though that person is his enemy. It's just this really great story. I'm so glad that it got included there so we can know about it. And it goes on from there to where Jesus is indeed crucified between these two malefactors, these two criminals. And the Gospel of Luke then is unique in telling us about the conversation between Jesus and these two other men, where one of them mocks Jesus, and then the other corrects the one who's mocking Jesus, and then speaks directly to Jesus, asking for Jesus to remember him. And then Jesus answers him, telling him about how he will be with him in paradise. So it's this really important story that has quite a bit of build-up to it, and we see the most complete version of it in the Gospel of Luke. Now, Luke is, of course, the longest of the four Gospels, and there's a lot that's unique about Luke, but I'm just touching on these elements that come towards the end of the Gospel, these things that really stood out to me, really fresh in my mind as we've just gotten through finishing our reading of it. The other one I wanted to mention is the whole story of Jesus after his resurrection, the way he spends time with the disciples and appears to them. Luke and John have the longest versions, the most detailed, the most memorable parts of that story I think are going to be found in Luke and in John. Of course, Matthew and Mark also have unique elements of that story to them. But Luke and John have the longest versions of that story. That's the story of Jesus with his disciples after his resurrection. Now in the Gospel of Mark, we hear that these two disciples come and tell the 11 that they had seen Jesus. In Luke, we get the full version of that story. We even learn one of their names, a disciple named Cleopas, and Jesus is with them on this journey that they're taking, and he's talking with them, but they don't recognize him until he breaks bread with them. And either that rings a bell and just, makes them recognize him because of how recognizable that experience is of being with Jesus and him breaking the bread like that, or Jesus allowed them to open their eyes or made them open their eyes to recognize him. Either way, when he sits with them and breaks the bread, they recognize Jesus and Jesus vanishes. And all that time they've been with Jesus, he's telling them from the scriptures what it was that had happened to Jesus. I guess talking about himself in the third person. And then when they have that realization moment, they say, oh, that's what it was. That's why our hearts were burning within us as he explained all those things to us. It's this really cool story that is unique to the Gospel of Luke. And this thing that they say, I'm going to read it here. Did not our heart burn within us while he talked with us by the way, and while he opened to us the scriptures? That's how I feel by the time we get through reading the full Gospel of Luke. It's just this feeling, this excitement, this longing, this nostalgia for like all this time that we've spent with Jesus during our reading of the gospel. It's just something that the gospels do when you read them. You just really get into them and you feel like you're there and you're experiencing Jesus's time on earth, and you're experiencing those things he does, the things he says, and by the time it's over, you feel like that was really special. That was really special, and you miss it. I miss Jesus sometimes after reading these stories. Did not our heart burn within us while he talked with us by the way, and while he opened to us the scriptures? And just one more thing that I want to point out here, read here from this last chapter of the Gospel of Luke. When Jesus is there with all his disciples, and he's eating, they give him some food, and he says, "These are the words which I spake unto you while I was yet with you, that all things must be fulfilled, which were written in the law of Moses, and in the prophets, and in the Psalms concerning me. Then opened he their understanding, that they might understand the scriptures." When Jesus was with them before his crucifixion, he tried to explain things to them. He did explain things to them, but they just had no concept. It was outside of their context, outside of their paradigm, these things that Jesus was telling them. For us now, in hindsight, we say, of course that happened. Yes, he died and he got resurrected, and when we read about him telling them those things before it happened, it seems odd to us that they don't get it. They don't get what he's telling them. But we have to understand just how outside of their understanding of just everything that they knew, everything that they thought they knew, what Jesus was telling them was outside of all that. After the fact now, he comes back, he says, remember these things. Remember I was telling you these things. And now they have their big aha moment. It's all revealed and it's all so perfect. It's all so great. They've gone from despair and fear and remorse and all that to now seeing Jesus alive again, and all these things just come flooding back, and just everything is perfect and everything is just so good, and Jesus gets to remind them of it. And it's fine for them to feel a little silly. Oh yeah, I should have seen that coming. Oh, what was wrong with me back then? When Jesus chides them, it's okay. It's okay to get chided by Jesus, because it's done with so much love, and it means that you're getting somewhere. It means that there's something in the work, something that you're getting to learn about. And he said unto them, thus it is written, and thus it behooved Christ to suffer and to rise from the dead the third day, and that repentance and remission of sins should be preached in his name among all nations, beginning at Jerusalem. And ye are witnesses of these things. So he comes back and says, this is what it was, this had to happen, thus it behooved Christ to suffer and to rise from the dead the third day. It was part of him, it was his nature, it was, well, like Jesus is beginning and end. He always was and always is and always will be. He is always and always has been that slain and resurrected lamb, that slain and resurrected deity. That is who he is. And so when he manifested in human form on earth, it had to happen. And I really like that word. It behooved Christ. Behooved. Now there's quite a few words from the King James Version that we just don't use today in English anymore. But this is one of those words that I think it makes a lot of sense still. I wish we used it more often. I like this word, behoove. Anyhow, there it is. Just some thoughts, some excitement about the Gospel of Luke that I wanted to share. Especially those last few chapters were just so much coming to a head, and it's such a good ending. It's such a good ending to that story of Jesus' time on earth with his disciples, and just all that he goes through with them and all that he shares with them and all that they learn from him. They were faithful with him for all that time, and they get to know him so well. It's just such a happy ending. And I feel like I can say that along with Cleopas and that other disciple. Didn't our hearts burn while we were spending this time with Jesus, learning all these things from Jesus while he opened up all these things to us? Well, please let me know what you think. Share your comments below. I will respond for sure, and I really look forward to talking to you again more later. Bye for now.